Welcome, my name's Josiah Halverson. Using rustic walnut and loose tenon joinery, I make this robust chair, piano bench. Let me take you through the build process from designing in SketchUp, routing with templates, milling, assembling, and finishing. Will this unique design find a place within an assortment of home decor? Will the joinery hold up to the demands of ordinary usage? Stay tuned to watch the process of Josiah's chair project. Before wasting any time or money on materials, I almost always design a project in SketchUp. A model was especially helpful on this project because I wanted to do template routing to create the chair components. After completing the model, I made a chair mock-up of some scrap plywood. I want to point something out here. I seem to like the masking tape and CA glue trick better than the double-sided tape trick. And the reason is, when I just put the masking tape, I did the length of from here to here. I ran a strip of glue that long. On the double-sided tape, I put a little 1-inch strip here, 1-inch strip here. And what I'm finding is there's a little bit more give with the double-sided tape, so that as I push the template against the bearing, it's actually pushing it in further, and then when I finish, it bounces back, and then I end up cutting more than I need to. But the double-sided tape is actually quite a pain in the butt to remove. But here, the masking tape and CA glue is much easier. This back support piece, it needs to be changed. That back piece needs to be wider to help balance out this piece. I modified it in SketchUp, exported a DXF file, went to Tim's house because he has a laser cutter, and here's the new piece. I was originally gonna do a profile round over, but I think I should match the curve that connects the bottom of the legs. Once all the components were routed using the router pattern bit, it was time to lay out the placement of all my mortises. Notice that on the curved leg stretcher, I flattened the ends. I designed it this way to make mortising easier. The domino, it needs a flat surface to reference. If I would have continued the curve all the way, mortising may not have gone so well. For the mock-up, I didn't need full-length dominoes. My quickest method to cut them was at the miter saw. So here's a couple of methods I use when cutting small pieces. One is to use FastCap's $10 million stick, link in the description, or two, trim them after installing. Now that the mock-up's done, I can start on the good stuff. However, I noticed some bad checking, and I wanted to cut into it to see how deep it went. Unfortunately, I ended up taking quite a bit off. Next, I lay out my templates, choosing locations for the best grain pattern while minimizing waste. Okay, this is how I set up the breakdown of these ginormous boards, 12, 13 feet long. Some of you might be wondering why he doesn't use the miter saw. Well, that's because with all the internal stabilizing forces, as soon as I cut into that, it's going to want to bend one way or the other. And that miter saw blade, it gets bound in there. And sometimes you almost need a hammer to get it out. What I find is so much easier to use the dang jigsaw. Now, this is 8/4 walnut. which is 2 inches, roughly 50 millimeters thick. I need to get this down to 40 millimeters thick. Now you would think the quickest way is to put it on the bandsaw, take just less than 10 millimeters off, get really close to 40 millimeters, and then finish it off with the planer. But what I have found is if I take too much off at the bandsaw, it will bow a little bit. Probably not so much at 40 millimeters, taking off 10, but I don't know, maybe it could happen a little bit. So the plan is first run it through the joiner, get a flat reference face. Then run it over the bandsaw, leaving plenty of margin because I want to monitor to see if it twists or bows at all. If it doesn't bow, then I might take another pass on the bandsaw, but ideally not. Ideally, I'd be able to take it straight to the planer after that. So we'll see how that goes. For short boards like this, I probably can avoid this next step and just trust that I got the surface flat. But I decided to check just in case. I used to use ripped MDF pieces for this, but I bought these aluminum ones from Lee Valley a few years ago. They helped me to know the high spots, usually on 2 diagonal corners, so I know which areas I should focus on when using the jointer. I can also use these to find cups and crowns. Sometimes if I want to do a quick check to see if it's flat and not twisted, and I don't want to get out the winding sticks, I just put it on a known flat surface, such as my table saw, and I check for any rocking. Since the leg stretcher is thinner, I take it to the bandsaw for a thinner rip. Now that I have one flat side, I take it to the planer. How do you like that dust collection hub? I almost made one like Jonathan Katz Moses' design, but I think this is better. His has a sliding gate which I foresaw getting clogged up. This one uses a Wood River Quick Connect hose adapter, and it is magical. Here I'm gluing up the boards. I'm using tape in this case to protect the clamp, but sometimes I use paste wax instead. Something I learned when gluing walnut is to use the darker glue. It ends up looking much better than regular white glue if by chance dry glue is visible at the seams. Looks like I put too much here. You'll also see salt, just a pinch at opposite ends. It'll actually prevent them from sliding out of alignment when clamping without compromising the bond. And now I'm changing out the 3/4 inch resaw blade for a 3/8 inch blade, better suited for contours. This is actually the first time using this blade, so it's cutting like butter. As many of you might know, I'm trying to get within 1/8 of an inch of the outline so that routing will go better. This next process went very well. I went through a bit of a learning curve with this monstrous Speed Tools Ranger bit. The link is in the description. But the double bearing makes it super useful for flipping the piece over and cutting in the opposite direction, such as when there's end grain and you want to prevent tear out. To use the pin for bracing when the fence can't be used due to curved pieces. You'll notice a pin that's screwed into the router table plate. I find it useful using as a fulcrum and brace until the piece can be braced solely by the bearing. I almost forgot to mention, since the capacity of my planer is only 13 inches wide, I had to rip just a little bit off the side through the table saw, and when I did that, I didn't have a perfectly flat reference, so I can't guarantee that my side is square to the base. So I'm going to just take a few seconds, take it over to the joiner, make sure that edge is 90 degrees. And I'm going to do that before I rip the chair to final width and cross cut to final depth. And now that I have two square sides, I can trim the seat to final depth. In case you're wondering why the extra step of squaring the two adjacent sides, I found that mortise placement is just more consistent. This ensures that the joint will be snug and strong, not to mention avoiding a wonky, wobbly chair. We can't have that. It's at this point when I'm wishing I just would make a sled already. The miter gauge won't work and the miter saw won't work, so out comes one of my most favorite tools of all time, the track saw. In conjunction with the TSO rail square, I can ensure my cross cut is square. A link is in the description. Since the legs are a bit small and needing straight rather than curved cuts, I figured they'd better be suited on the table and miter saw rather than using the template with a router. So here you're seeing just that after squaring them up on the joiner. I milled up a brace piece to go in the center of the chair so that I can cut this piece to fit. I want that to be nice and tight, so I'll do that one of the last cuts. Now this part's crucial. I'm setting up to use the festival domino, and you need to lay out all your parts so that when you use the domino you reference the proper side. For example, I'm either going to reference the fence or the base. So I lay out, this is the left side, inside. This is out. This is out. This is the right, inside. So my reference is going to be the outside, and the reason is because I also need some mortises here to match up here. So if I just, in my mind, say the domino will always reference the outside, that way I can cut a mortise referencing the fence to the outside, fence to the outside, and fence to the outside. So that way the distance between the fence and the cutter will always be the same. If I don't do that, it's going to offset the piece. Now when I use the domino, I would like to reference this left side with the tabs on the domino. See these tabs? I can reference any of these to the center of the mortise, but I can't here because this piece is curved. What I do in that case is I have to mark a line through both boards, a straight line, and I have to reference that line. You see the center mark here? So that's how I'll line it up. Either there or here. And that's what I did on the mock-up board. You see the lines? Uh-oh. Here's where I realized my mistake. Well, shoot, that's just one of those things that happens. The second mortise was not placed in the correct place. Okay, I'm gonna do myself a favor, save some time by not filling all the way to the top. There's no reason to. This mortise is plenty deep for that tenon to be strong. So if I don't overfill it, I won't have to do any chisel work. This is gonna have to sit for 24 hours. One well-known trick to smooth the surface of bubbled epoxy is to hit it with a blowtorch. And now for the half-lap joints for the feet. Once I get the depth and side boundaries dialed in, the rest goes pretty quickly. You'll notice an extra mortise there. I was originally thinking to align the two pieces with a domino to facilitate assembly, but that didn't end up working very well. You'll see in a minute how clamps and blocking, they were all that I needed. Well, I give that a big thumbs down. Dominoes, they don't line up well enough. See the gap there? We can't have that. So plan B is to ditch these dominoes and just try to clamp it with the tight glue joint. I'm gonna make a chamfer on this underside. I think it'll help it look a little more sleek if I do a under bevel all the way around. But I need to stop right there where the leg is. So I'm gonna mark it. Now I'm preparing to template route the back curve of the seat. This is when the chair really starts developing some style, in my eyes at least. Routing the seat curve went pretty dang good. And since I'm cutting with the grain, never perpendicular to it, for the entire cut, I won't have to flip it over, and I won't have any tear out on the end. And here's that under bevel. Now I'm planning for the glue up. I would like to use wood glue, but I'm gonna have to use resin, and the reason because that that repair that I made had a refill with resin, and wood glue doesn't stick to resin. So I think I'll just do the whole chair with resin instead of wood glue. Here's another offcut, which I'm gonna need to cut. Probably about right there, or shorter. Okay, dry fit. This is the clamp setup. Used the offcuts to make these rounded edges into square parallel clamping edges. Did an offcut there, did an offcut on this piece right here. So now I can use my parallel clamps. I think we're good. What is nice, really nice about epoxy resin is I've got tons of open time. So lots of time to assemble this, which totally relieves the pressure. Glue ups are one of the most stressful things, and if I can increase the time from minutes to hours, it goes so much more nicely. Some parts I can sand easily after assembly, and some parts I want to wait until then anyway. For example, this would be a waste of time sanding it before glue up, because I need to match those and sand the glue out afterwards. But you look at more of the inside parts, like this right here is going to be much easier to sand this part where the inside corners are before assembly than after. So I'm going to do that. So I've marked everywhere that I want to sand. So there and there. It would just be a lot easier if I do it before assembly. And I want to sand this corner down, but I've made a mark here so that I know not to go beyond that, because I don't want to sand right there. I want to sand that after assembly. And now sanding, starting with grit 80, then 120, then 180. And maybe this is a good time to tell my story of how I got hooked on Festool. Well, back when I was working for the power company, I traveled a bit more, and we were waiting to get onto a flight. You know those deals where they ask you to take a later flight, and there's usually an incentive? Well, this one day, I think it was a $700 incentive, and we had some extra time, so me and my coworker, we took him up on that offer. Well, guess what I bought with that $700? During the time, I forget what project I was working on, but I remember I'd be doing a lot of sanding. And at the time, I was in my little 12 by 16 foot shed, and I knew I did not want to be breathing all that dust. So I got searching on what sanders have the best dust collection. Well, that led me to a Festool sander with dust collector. I bought one of those, I started using it, and I was hooked. Using epoxy resin, I just love that I have over an hour to assemble this. It drastically reduces the pressure. So what I do to set up, I have a piece of wax paper so I can set things down on. I don't get resin on my workbench. I keep a rag with acetone handy in case I spill any or have any squeeze out that I need to quickly wipe off. Acetone is great with that. And I've got my brush. Well, then it ended up being way too much epoxy, but oh well. Assembly went well. I felt like all the joints are going to be nice and tight. Everything's clamped down and ready to set overnight. It's going to be sweet. This is going to be a solid chair. Oops, forgot one piece. My internal brace here. I'll put that in. And there we go. All done. Got a little bit of squeeze out. I know that's going to be a solid bond. I'll just come back with a wet rag and wash that. Let it sit overnight. It'll be sweet. This part was actually pretty satisfying. There's something about achieving a smooth bevel despite the transition from one component to another that brings a great feeling of satisfaction. It really turned out well. And after some vacuuming and cleaning, I'm about ready to finish. Here's everything I need to finish this puppy. This finish requires 3 parts finish to 1 part accelerator, and here's why I love this finish so much. Just buff it on and then buff it off. Behold thy royal throne. I'll post the chair width, height, and all the other dimensions on my website. Now, please enjoy as I take you through some final shots. I'd love to hear your comments or questions. And that's the process of Josiah's chair project. I hope that by sharing this, some might be inspired to make and create awesome things.